وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Begin with the praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask and we beseech Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send His peace and blessings upon the last and final messenger Muhammad sallallahu wa sallam alayhi. Alhamdulillah, we're here for our second review session. Last time, unfortunately, we had a very noble intention of completing our review in one 4-hour period, which was a 4-month period of information. And so I applaud all of you for being able to stick through it, especially the new students, who, alhamdulillah, it was a very ambitious endeavor. But alhamdulillah, we're here for our second review, inshallah, so that we can try to take a little bit more time with some of the more complex principles that we have now just started. And I hope that, inshallah, with this intention, I didn't want to delay this review because, the more each week that we go in the official class, the more complex it's going to be, and I want to make sure that we're all up to date, because actually in a couple of weeks, Sister Monica, because I have my syllabus here, what we're going to be covering tomorrow will be the verbal sentences, and then inna and its sisters, inna wa akhawatuha, and then the sentence converter can as well. So, and the verbal sentence. So we're getting into the sentence structures, etc. So it's going to be a little bit more complex as we continue. And actually, in a couple of weeks, our intention is to start reading the basic primer, the basic book, inshallah, Stories of the Prophets, Qasas an-Nabiyyin. So with that, inshallah, with reciting or reading Qasas an-Nabiyyin, we're gonna get a lot of practice of the principles that we got, inshallah. So if things seem kind of abstract now, and it was the intention of the course to keep things kind of there, have some practice items, so that you can understand the concepts. Now, inshallah, with the help of Allah, we're going to be getting into reading, which is going to be applying those principles. And then the more we see it, line after line after line, page after page after page, the more these principles become natural for us, inshallah. And we're not just thinking of them as like little diagrams, but rather we're seeing them in the flow of the reading. So, just a quick recap of what we were able to review in our last session. I have eraser. So in the Arabic language, we discussed that there's 3 types of words, and we start basically the process of this class is to start with the basics, which is understanding words, and understanding how to put words together, and then understanding how to put more words together in complex sentences. So we start off with words. In Arabic, there's 3 types of words. Okay? That was the first thing that we discussed. How do we, in order to understand that, we discussed that there are 8 types of words in the English language. Noun, pronoun, adjective, adverb, verb, etc., conjunction, article, all these different types of things, and we give examples of them, which we all see and we use in our daily language. And then we applied, okay, now there's only 3 types of words in the Arabic language, so how do we go about putting 8 words that we're familiar with in the English language into 3 categories? And we were able to do that, and there's a chapter in the book, inshallah, for that purpose. So, in Arabic, there are only 3 types of words, and they're called ism, fi'l, and harf. Ism, fi'l, and harf. Okay? And so we kind of give examples of each of these types of words, and how to understand the difference between them. But then the focus was getting into the details of ism. The second thing that we discussed is how do you identify an ism? So identifying an ism. And there are 3 different ways, or there are 4 major different ways of identifying an ism. Does anyone remember what they were?
Alif lam, tanween, and tanween, and then there are specific words that we are known to know for ism. What is the 4th one? I don't remember.
The 3rd one is ta marbuta, or the femininity, yes. And then you're confusing that with femininity, which is great. And then the last one was what we learned just most recently, and we'll pick up today with that review, which is related to grammatical states. The 4th sign is the state of jar. Only isms take the state of jar. So those are the 4 different signs of identifying ism. And once you're able to identify an ism, the next stage of our discussion and our studies was regarding the 4 categories, the 4 characteristics of an ism. Every single ism has 4 major characteristics. And we need to be able to identify those things. Why? As we saw in the last class, when we had that long discussion of the sentences that we went over, is that when you're able to identify the characteristics of the isms, it will help give you hints, it will help you in being able to organize the sentence appropriately according to grammar. So the ism has 4 major characteristics that we need to identify. And we use English and Arabic interchangeably because in our class, terminology is not important. Understanding the concepts are important, but terminology will help you remember the concepts. So of course, you need to put some effort into that, but we use the terms interchangeably because when we get to the reading, my definition of success for a student, inshallah, is when they're reading, they're able to translate and they're able to understand what's going on. And you know, maybe they won't be able to say, oh, this is, you know, marfu' and etc. blah blah blah, but you know, they know what's going on. They know what the word is doing, the sentence means. So that's what's going to be important. So the 4 different characteristics of the state is definiteness or ma'rifah, plurality, so single, dual, and plural, gender, masculine and feminine, and the last but not least, and the most important and comprehensive discussion is i'rab or grammatical state. And by putting in this order, it's helpful for us, you know, inshallah, we can go through our head and try to remember the concepts. And this is how we should review. We should say, okay, the first one we discussed was three types of words. Try to review them in your head, and you go to identifying how to identify an ism for the 4 signs of an ism. And then once you identify that a word is an ism, then there's 4 characteristics. What are the different characteristics and what are the differences between them? So how do you know ma'rifah? How do you know definite versus indefinite? So alif lam versus tanween. And then how do you know plurality? So how do you know a word is single rather than dual, rather than plural? And then when you know that a word is plural, you know that it's either broken plural, sound masculine plural, or sound feminine plural. And then you go into gender. How do you tell that a word is masculine or feminine? And then how do you tell what the grammatical state of a word is? And this was the last discussion, the last focus of our discussion that we had to like rush, and everyone's like, oh my god, all our whole day was like ruined. Everyone's like, I hate this class. So grammatical state, okay, was the last thing we have. Grammatical state, and that's the discussion today. Okay, so today, inshallah, with the help of Allah, we're going to begin by discussing grammatical state. Okay, and this is the pinnacle of Arabic grammar, because in English, grammar is focused primarily on word ordering, and you can know what's going on in a sentence based on the order of words. In Arabic, however, the order of words can change, and I'll show you and identify why grammatical state is important. Okay? So this is what we discussed, and then we're going to discuss today, inshallah. At the beginning today, we're going to start to discuss grammatical states. The 4th characteristic of an ism. So, grammatical states. If I give you a few sentences right here. Amir ضرب عامر ضرب محمد. Okay. This is 3 words, 3 simple words. If you even have a sentence with 3 simple words, you can put it into 6 different possible ways. You can organize it in 6 different possible ways. If you study statistics, the first possible word is 3, then 2, then 1. So 3 times 2, which is 6, times 1, which is 6. And so there's 6 different possible orders you can put this in, put these words in order. For example, you can say ضرب عامر محمدا. محمدا. ضرب عامر محمدا. So Amir becomes a second word. The other way you can do it is محمدا ضرب عامر. Okay? And there's 6 different ways. We did half of them. And so, why is grammatical state important? So what you notice here, what i'rab, what grammatical state entails, is identifying the ends of isms, the ends of nouns, and as signs to the purpose of those nouns in the sentence. Okay? And this is one of the simpler ways of understanding grammatical states. So in Arabic, in English, we can say, this is the translation of it in English. Amir hit Muhammad. Okay? And this is what I mean. In English, the way you understand the function of a word in a sentence is based on order. You cannot put Muhammad hit Amir and think that Amir is the one who is doing the action rather than Muhammad is the one doing the action. In English, you cannot rearrange this. This is critical. The order is critical in English. Amir is the one who is the subject. He's the one performing the verb. Hit is the verb, and Muhammad is the object of the verb. Okay? So Amir hit Muhammad. And so we cannot change those anyway. Hit Amir Muhammad. But if you were to translate these sentences literally, okay, so Amir daraba, hit in past tense, Muhammadan. Okay? Hit Muhammad. So this is the more direct way in terms of order of the words. This is the most accurate. However, this is not wrong. You can say daraba Amiru Muhammadan. And you can also say Muhammadan daraba Amiru. And I did that stressing for a purpose, for a reason. In Arabic, you can change the order of the words in order to give more subtle changes to the meaning. But the official meaning is never changed. And so, Amir, daraba Muhammad. Amir is the subject, daraba is the verb, Muhammadan is the object. Then you could put the verb, daraba, he hit Amir, Muhammad. If you want to stress the verb, you put the verb first. He hit him. Amir hit Muhammad. Right? That's basically the way that you can translate that. The subtle change in the translation. Or you can say, Muhammad, Amir hit him. Right? Remember, you know Muhammad? Amir hit him. Like he's a big guy or something like that. And Amir had the bravery. So you can change the order of the sentence to give subtle changes in the meaning, but the official meaning doesn't change. The official translation doesn't change. However, in Arabic, if we have these 6 different types of ways that you can order the sentence, when we're used to knowing what's going on based on the order, we need to have a clue as to what's going on. How do we know who's the subject? How do we know who's the object? And this is an example in verbal sentences, okay? So, how do we know that? Based on the grammatical state of the ism. Okay, so this is why it's important to learn the grammatical state. So, what we learn is that there are 3 major grammatical states in the Arabic language for an ism. So it's called i'rab. I'rab. I'rab is the study of the endings of words. The study of the endings of words as signs of their function in the sentence. It's basically it, okay? So in i'rab, the i'rab of an ism only has 3 possibilities. The first one is the ism is in the state of raf'an. Raf'an. Okay? So either an ism is raf'an, it is in the grammatical state of raf'an, or it is in the state of nasbun. Or nasb. Or it is in the state of jar. Jarran. And remember, only isms take the state of jar. And by the way, verbs also take grammatical states. And we'll talk about those in a later stage of our class. And so that's why one of the signs of an ism is that if it's in the state of jar, only isms take the state of jar. Okay? So, how do you know what the state is for a sentence, for a word? In order to understand what grammatical state an ism is in, you need to look at the ending of that ism. And there are signs, they're called alamat al-i'rab, or the alamat of rafa, the alamat of nasab, the alamat of jar. So there are signs of rafa. There are signs that indicate that an ism is in the state of rafa. And there are signs that indicate that a word is in the state of nasab. And there are signs that indicate that a word is in the state of jar. So, the sign, the basic sign for a single, so we talk about plurality, and this is where plurality comes into play. So you need to identify whether it's single, dual, or plural. And once you've identified that, then each of those three different types of plurals have different signs. Okay? For a single, the basic sign for a single ism, one ism, is, I'm just trying to find my red. I like red better, but I guess okay. Here it is. Is what we call dhamma. Okay? So if you have a wow looking letter, for example, I'll just cheat here and give you an example here. That is called dhamma. And it can also be double dhamma. It doesn't matter, that's tanween, it doesn't matter. Okay? Nasab is a fatha, or double fatha. And jar is a kasra, or double kasra. Okay? So those are the basic signs of a singular ism in the grammatical state. And so, basically, we can already look. We first identify that this is an ism. Amir is an ism. How do we know that Amir is an ism? Because first of all, it's a proper name. It's someone's name. So that's very simple. That's not, you don't need a sign for that. That's just given. So Amir is a name, a proper name. And therefore, we know that it's an ism. And so we go through the motions and we say, okay, is it definite or indefinite? Is it single, dual, or plural? Is it masculine or feminine? So, etc., etc. But the most important thing for grammatical state is it single, dual, or plural? And if it is plural, is it a broken plural, a sound masculine plural, or sound feminine plural? So this one, this is the most simple type of ism you could find. It is a singular ism. And so the signs of singular isms is dhamma, fatha, and kasra. And so what kind of sign is this? Dhamma. And so therefore, just by knowing the sign, you can say this is in the state of what? Raf. Okay? Daraba we know is a verb, so that's a different discussion. Muhammadan. So its sign right here. So we find out what kind of plurality is it? Single, dual, or plural. So again, same thing like Amir. It is a proper name. Muhammad is a proper name. It's someone's name, so it's one person. So it's a singular word. So the most basic type of plurality you can find. So therefore, these signs are valid. Okay? So Muhammadan has a fatha. So just by knowing this, by looking at the end, you can tell what grammatical state it is in. What is its grammatical state? Nasab. Okay? And so the reason why it's important now is that one of the functions, so now you've identified the grammatical state of an ism. Once you're able to identify the grammatical state of an ism, you learn on page 57, and sister, you can take my book for the meantime, inshallah. Okay.
Thank you.
So page 57. That, and I think I have my own table of contents here, so I'll be able to throw you guys. So page 57 is the beginning of the grammatical status. That's the grammatical status of pronouns. 48, yes. 48. If we turn to 48, that's the beginning of the chapter for grammatical state, and it discusses what we discussed. But if you turn to page 51, the 22 places of grammatical status. Better term for that is the 22 functions of the grammatical status, okay? So if you turn to page 51, you'll see that there are 22 different functions of a grammatical state. There are 12 different reasons why someone takes the state. 8 different reasons why someone takes the state of rafa. So raf has 8 different functions in a sentence. Nasab has 12 different functions, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Yeah, 12 different functions. Jar only has 2 different functions. There are only 2 different reasons why a word takes the state of jar, and so it's the easiest one. and we'll learn those in a bit, inshallah. So once you've identified that a word is rafa just by the signs, you're like, okay, it can only have 8 different reasons why it's in the state of rafa. So what we have discussed so far in regards to grammatical state are a few fundamental rules, basic reasons why, basic functions of the rafa. So the basic function of a rafa is it's the subject of a sentence. That's the simplest rule. Subject. Okay? So the basic rule of a reason why a word is in the state of rafa is because it's the subject of the sentence. That's the basic rule. Okay? The rules for nasab, the basic rule, like a basic hint as to the function, what's going on, and this is out of those 12 different reasons why I stated in the nasab, about 5 or 6 of them, about half of them at least, relates to the verb. And specifically, they give details of a verb. Details of a verb. And in short, adverbs. Okay. I'm going to write this separately later too, but I want to just keep it on the side for the purpose of our examples here. Okay? So, in short, adverbs. All adverbs are in the state of nasab. And what do we define adverbs as? And when we discuss the English examples of adverbs, they provide description of verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Okay. But in the purpose of Arabic, all isms that detail verbs, all isms that describe verbs, give details to verbs, they are in the state of nasab. Also, all objects of verbs are in the state of nasab. So, adverbs and objects. Plus objects. Okay? And as I said, there's only 2 reasons why a word takes the state of jar. So it's the easiest one. So most of the difficulty comes with rafa and nasb. Jar is very simple. There are only 2 reasons why a word takes the state of nasb. Jar. It's either because it follows a harf jar, like fi, ila, min, ala, etc. That's the only, if it comes after one of those, it becomes jar. The only other reason is because it's the possessor. It's a mudafun ilay. So, kitabullahi. Why does it have he at the end of Allah? Lafz al-jalala is because Allah is the possessor of kitab. So in that construct, and we'll talk about that a little bit, okay? So, jar is very simple, so I'm not going to put the details. There are only 2 different reasons. So if you remember those, jar is easy. You see, and that's the most, you'll see it so commonly. So jar is easy, you're like, alhamdulillah, I know 1/3 of Arabic language grammatical state, so you're like all confident and stuff. Nasab is probably the most difficult, because nasab has all these special, there are 12 different reasons why nasab takes it, and that's the one that requires some thought. So in this simple example here, in a sentence that involves a verb, we already have 2 different things that help us in a verb, in a sentence that has a verb. You can already tell the subject and you also tell the object based on the grammatical state. And so that's why you can change the order however you want. Because if you know that rafa is the subject and nasab is the object, and you know the signs of rafa and you know the signs of nasab, then you can change the order however you want. And by changing the order, you change the meaning subtly, by emphasis, etc. But you can always tell who's the subject, who's the verb, and who's the object. Or what is the subject, what is the verb, and what is the object. Okay? So in this example, Amir, we said, is already in the state of rafa. So we know Amir is the subject of the sentence. Amir is the one who's performing the action. The action is daraba, which means he hit in the past tense. So Amir hit. Muhammadan is a state of nasab because of the fatha. And therefore we know it is either an object of the verb or it's an adverb. And so in 3 different constructs you have to have an object, okay? For most verbs. Go ahead.
So if we say Amirun daraba Muhammad, then we are saying, okay, now Muhammad hit Amir.
Exactly. So if we, just by changing this, just by changing the ending, just by changing it to this and this, then you've changed the complete meaning of the sentence. And that's why, even though in Arabic like when they have the Imam reciting Quran and he may make mistakes in the endings of the words. So, na'udhu billah, you say, خَلَقَ اللَّهُ الْأَرْضَ. Allah is who is the one who khalaqa means to create. خَلَقَ اللَّهُ الْأَرْضَ. Allah created the earth. But if you say خَلَقَ اللَّهُ الْأَرْضُ, you've changed the meaning completely. Though these little mistakes in tashkil and in the harakat or in the fatha, dhamma, kasra, though they don't you don't necessarily need to correct them in it. But if it changes the meaning fundamentally like that, then yeah, you should correct them because it changed. Allah is the one being created now in that sentence. So that's why it's important to know the grammatical state, and it helps you. Like when you're memorizing Quran, and you're like, oh, what's going on here? And you're like, if you know the basic meaning of what's going on, then you can help. Like, oh, is it Allahu or Allah? And then you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. It's the only way it makes sense. So that's how critical the grammatical state is, because it indicates who is doing what. Go ahead.
So why Amir is taking one fatha and Muhammad is taking two?
I was waiting for that question to come up. So this is something we haven't studied in class yet. It's a little bit more complex, but there's something called mamnu' min as-sarf. So mamnu' min as-sarf, there are special types of isms that have special rules. And the special type of isms, those rules is that they don't take tanween and they don't take kasra. No matter what grammatical state they're in, they don't take tanween, they don't take kasra. So, and this is one of them. And I'm not going to go into details.
I was reading in the book and there was a Yusuf. For the Yusuf there was one, and for Muhammad there was two, and I was confused.
Ah, there we go. So, and usually you'll find it with common names, proper names, and specifically, they're called they're non-Arabic proper names. Arabic names that are not rooted in Arabic. So Amir, Yusuf, Aisha, also proper names that are female names. There are special rules that indicate that these are words called mamnu' min as-sarf. I don't know why they decided to make all these crazy rules, right, when they're creating the language. But there are about 8 characteristics of an ism. If they have any ism has 2 of these characteristics, it takes mamnu' min as-sarf. I have to read it myself. But for example, if it's a proper name and if it's a feminine name, proper name, foreign name, not in the Arabic language. So if it has any of these 2 characteristics, like Amir, the root of Amir is not an Arabic name. The root of Yusuf, that's probably more common for us. The root of Yusuf is not. It's not an Arabic name. It's from Judaic background of his language of that time, right? Which is probably Aramaic or something like that. So because it's not founded in the Arabic language, and it's a proper name, it has 2 characteristics. It's called mamnu' min as-sarf. It doesn't take tanween, it doesn't take double letters, and it doesn't take a kasra. And so it's Yusufa. And Allah said to Yusufa. It doesn't say to Yusufi. So it's a little bit more complex, but don't worry about that, inshallah. Go ahead, sis.
This is completely unrelated. It's kind of chilly, though.
Oh, is it?
That's how we can
Should we
Just
turn
turn
it
it down a little bit.
You could probably just turn it off.
Let's turn it on.
We'll see if it turns off, inshallah. Sorry about that. So that's called so when you see that, you'll usually see it with proper names, but there are other reasons why you see it too. And when you see it, I'm just going to tell you mamnu' min as-sarf. Okay, and then you're like, okay, no more questions until later. Okay. So Anan daraba Muhammad. Any other questions? So basically, what we learned is that each ism has a grammatical state. How do you identify that grammatical state? Based on the ending of the word. Once you've identified the grammatical state, you know that there are 22 different functions, or there are 8 different functions of rafa, there are 12 different functions of nasab, and there are 2 different functions of jar. Okay? And then once you've identified that something's in the state of rafa, you have to think, which one of the 8 is it? What is it doing here? And there are a few simple, golden, basic principles that will help you majority of the time. The first one is that if it's rafa, it's likely the subject. It's the subject of the sentence. The second principle in regards to nasab is that either it's the object of the verb or it's a description of the verb. It's giving details of the verb. For example, Amir hit Muhammad. But if you said Amir daraba Muhammadun shadidan. Shadidan. Shadid means, you know, the translation of it is, you learn the translation, and translation means hard. Okay, or very stern. But you've identified its grammatical state. Fatha, what is it? It's nasab. So, shadidan must be giving details of the daraba. Either it's the object of the verb, but we already figured out that the object of the verb, actually, you know, in the original one, you know, Amiru daraba Muhammadan, we already figured out Muhammad is the object of the verb. And you know, shadidan means hard. So it must be describing the hitting. So he hit Muhammad very hard, or he hit Muhammad hard, right? Go ahead.
I'm sorry, spoken Arabic, I understand that all of these vowels are not, are they spoken? Or is this mostly for reading the language?
No, it's also in speaking. So when you're pronouncing, so you say Amiru daraba Muhammadan. But the difference is if you end the sentence with dhamma or kasra, you don't pronounce the, so you say daraba Muhammadan, Amir daraba Muhammadan, but because it's a fatha at the end, you turn it into an alif, so Amiru daraba Muhammadan. And so in spoken Arabic, it is there. What you won't find, however, is in more complex books, you will not find the tashkil there. They expect that you know what's going on. They expect that you know the grammar. So in spoken Arabic, long story short, in spoken Arabic, yeah, you'll find the vowels there. And spoken Fusha Arabic, I should say, like the slang language is different, or the tribal languages are different, of course. But even then, I believe they'll have the pronunciation of the vowels.
So are you saying for daraba, if that fatha on that was different, then shadid, that would be different
On
also?
daraba, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, because daraba is a verb. So we're not talking about verbs here. Okay, we're talking about isms.
But I'm saying for when you put hard there, would that change? Are you saying that?
Let's say it one more time. Ask your question one more time.
Because you put hard in that state, would that change? When would it change the double fatha? Tanween.
Would it change to one? You mean?
Yeah. Would it change a state in any? Would it always stay with a double fatha?
Yeah, exactly. So whenever you're talking about adverbs, it would most likely be in the state of, it would not be it would not be definite, it would be indefinite. And so what we talked about before, just to kind of recap real quick, is every ism is either in the state of definite, is either definite or indefinite. And the signs that indicate that a word is definite is alif lam. And the sign that a word is indefinite is no alif lam. And plus double letter, tanween. Okay? So the reason why there's tanween here, the reason why there's double letter, is because this word is indefinite. Okay? So that's the reason why it's double letter. And it's indefinite because the adverbs describing a verb are going to be indefinite. Okay? You couldn't say Amir darba Muhammadun ash-shadida. You couldn't say ash-shadida. Because the only way you take away tanween here is if you add an alif lam to it. So if you make it like this. So if you change it to ash-shadida, that doesn't make sense in this sentence. Okay, you can't say the shadid, the hard. You can't say the hard. Because when you have alif lam, it means the hard. Okay? So ash-shadida, and so that doesn't make sense, so you're not going to use that. So the reason why you have tanween here is because there's no alif lam. And there's no alif lam here because it wouldn't make sense to add an alif lam there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
So once you understand these basic principles of why you have grammatical states, the next question is, how do you identify the grammatical state? And I've already told you, the simplest form of identifying a grammatical state is dhamma, fatha, and kasra. And that's the most common one. But that is only for the single word, the single ism, okay? So I told you there's the single ism, there's the dual ism, there's the plural ism. And when you've identified that there's a plural ism, there's broken plural, sound masculine plural, and sound feminine plural. So let's review that real quick before we go into the other signs. Okay? So, anyone need this to write down? Everyone's good?
I just need that,
Go ahead.
that top one.
The top one? Okay. I've explained this a little bit differently. I think this is probably a better way of explaining it than how I was confusing guys before, and I was thinking about that a lot. I'm sorry. Did you need to do that?
I got it.
Okay. So if you turn to page 52, we'll just review that real quick and we'll discuss what's going on in that page. Can I erase it? All right.
Yes,
So, you have i'rab. i'rab al-ism. Al-ism. There are three different states you can have. Raf'an, nasbun, and jar. Okay? Over here we have plurality. So the signs, we're going to talk about the signs. In order to know what sign is for what, we need to know whether it's single, dual, plural, etc. So the first type we have is singular. The next type is dual. Next type is broken plural. Next type is sound, masculine, plural. And then sound, feminine, plural. Okay? So we have a little table there that kind of basically breaks it up in this type of category. So what I'm putting here are the signs. What are the signs that indicate, and I'm going to give you an example and I'm going to show you the sign. So the example is Muhammad. I'm going to do some Spider-Man or Superman colors. Okay? Singular, Raf'an is Dhamma. Nasbun is Fatha. Okay? Jarran, what is it?
Kasra.
Kasra. Muhammadin. Okay? Those are the signs for a singular word. We all know that. That's the basic one. That's the most common one you're going to find.
Do we have to put alif in front of Muhammadan?
We do, so I'll put that there for your own, so I don't for consistency's sake, I'll do that.
Okay, so we need it.
Yeah, that's the proper way to spread it. I was sparing you that, but for consistency, for accuracy, that's good. Muhammad. So now we have dual. So dual, remember, is Muhammadani, Muhammadaini. So I'm going to say kitab. For kitab means book. Kitab one, kitabani, kitab kutub. So kitabani. So the sign of rafa in a dual word what you know it as. So this is how you make a word dual. By the way, you add the alif between the second and last word. So it's kitabun, kitabani. So this is added. This is a sign that indicates that it's dual. The sign of dual will either be an alif nun, or as we'll see in a moment, ya nun. So kitab baini. So nasab is kitab baini. That's the sign of nasab. So if you say kitabaini, rajulaini, right? As we said, kalimatani, habibatani ala lisani, or khafifatani ala lisani, thaqilatani ala al-mizani, subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanallah al-azim, which is the example we discussed in class. Okay? So kitabaini. If you say kitabaini, you know that it's dual, and you know that it's either nasab or jar, because unfortunately, the nasab and jar sign is the same for this one. Okay? It's the same thing. So it'll look the same. So you're gonna be like, oh man, how do I know if it's nasab or jar? Like, why can't they got lazy on this one, right? And they're building it, they're like, oh, we're tired of all these rules. They made all these rules for mamnu' and asar. This is more important, right? As we've discussed. I don't even know why they have mamnu' and stuff. But we know why they have this, but they didn't want to go full-fledged. Katabaini. Broken plural. So what's a broken plural? Remember, a broken plural is either the original letters, one is missing, or they add words to it. So an example of broken plural is kutubun. So the original word is kitaban. Sorry, kitabun. Assalamu alaikum. Sure, give me a moment.
He's saying that I'm like, kid.
So, kitabani, kitabaini, kitabain. So now how do you know what a broken plural is? I'll give you the example of a broken plural. The example of a broken plural is kitabun, right? The original word is kitaban, kitabun, kitabun. Alright, and so one example of broken plural is either these original letters are either they disappear or you add more letters to it to make it a plural. So in this case it becomes kutubun. The plural of kitabun is kutubun. Kutub. Okay? So why is this one a broken plural? Why is kutub a broken plural?
Alif.
The alif is missing. The alif ran away, right? So because that one is not there, it's broken plural. Okay? You can also, another example of broken plural is qadamun. Okay? Those are the two different types of examples. Does anyone know that this means pen? What's the plural of qadamun? Qalam. Right? Aqlam. So there are added letters there. Therefore, it's a broken plural. Anytime you see that as a plural, here it's called broken plural. So either of those, you can say aqlamun, or you can use kutubun. I'll use kutubun because we have kutub right above it. So the broken plural is actually very simple. It's the same sign as singular. So it's dhamma, fathan, kasra. Okay, so kutubun. Yes, go ahead.
What is broken plural in English?
There's no English broken plural. We call it broken plural. It's called jama' taksir, because it's called broken because the original letters are broken up. Arabs have their own rules. Don't try to rationalize it. Okay, they just try to come up with plurals for things, and they're like, okay, there's a kalaman now. Allahu a'lam. You know, there is a science to the letters, and so there's probably reasons for these. That if you want to get like PhD level Arabic, but I have no idea, unfortunately. So aqlamun. So you just need to know. You need to be. The purpose of this is to identify. It's there. We didn't make up the rules. They're there. We gotta work with the rules they made, and therefore you need to identify. Go ahead.
Not to divert too much, but these rules postdated the Quran, or because since it was mostly an oral language.
Yeah. So just it goes back to your previous question, which was that the way you speak the language was there. The grammatical rules existed with oral language, and so you had to say kitabun and kitabun. You had to say khalaqallahu al-arda. Even when you speak it, you say khalaqallahu al-arda. But if you say khalaqallahu al-ardu, even in English, even orally, it changes the meaning. So these existed before the Quran. And these existed, and as you know, Arabic was predominantly an oral tradition. But the grammatical rules existed in the oral. And the way we speak, we can't say Muhammad hit Amir. If we want to say Amir is the one who hit Muhammad, we cannot say Muhammad hit Amir. Orally or written, it doesn't matter. The difference, though, is the writing of the tashkil, making up the tashkil, and formalizing the different vowels and how to write them. That came at a later stage, or that existed before. It was not common, but the Quran, for example, the original Quran was written without the tanween, the dhamma, etc. A foreigner who accepted Islam later, he's like, wait, we're getting confused here. Okay, we don't know the Arabic language aslan, so they started adding tanween, all these things, but those tanween existed orally. You see what I'm saying? It was how you pronounce the letters. All that changed is how to write it down. So. Those rules existed, long story short, those rules existed long before the Quran. It was part of the Arabic tradition. But we know that the Arabic tradition was traditionally an oral tradition. But these grammatical rules existed in how they spoke with each other. And how you write it down, it came obviously at later stages when the writing became more predominant. So the rules existed with the oral tradition, the pronunciations, all that stuff. The writing came at a later stage. The Quran initially did not have all the vowels written down, the dhamma, fatha, kasra. However, they were added later in order to help those who did not have the original oral tradition. They were not solid in the way of pronouncing. So therefore, they put it in to make it easier for people. So I hope that answered your question. Inshallah, a bit long-winded. So kutubun, there's the same thing as singular. So broken plurals look the same as have the same signs as singular. So it's kutuban. Right? Kutuban. And kutubin. Okay? Well, we have two more. Sound, masculine, plural. Sound, masculine, plural. So a difference between a broken plural and a sound plural is that the original letters are not broken. So muslimun, what's for Muslim? How do you say female Muslim? Muslimatun, right? So just remember that. We're going to discuss that next. So how do you make Muslim into plural? Muslimuna. Muslimina too. But the reason why Muslimina is because of the grammatical state, which we'll talk about in a second.
So muslimuna. Okay? So because these original mim, sin, lam, mim, 1, 2, 3, 4, mim, sin, lam, mim, because none of those are missing, and there are no added letters in between them or before them or whatever. So because the original word, the original letters are stuck together, they're sound. They didn't break up. They're not broken, you see? That's called a sound plural. And so there's sound masculine plural, and there's sound feminine plural. And for sound masculine plural, we just see. For sound feminine plural, we have muslimatun. Okay? Ta marbuta, ya ta marbuta, and it becomes female. So it becomes how do you make it plural?
Muslimat.
Exactly, muslimatun. Muslimatun. Okay? So muslimatun. Alright? So that's how you make it, because the original letters, and again, ta marbuta is not an original letter. Ta marbuta is a feminine sign, okay, sign of femininity. So the original letters are still mim, sin, lam, and mim. Mim, sin, lam, and mim, because they're still there and they're not broken. It's still a sound plural, but it's a sound feminine plural. Why? Because you have ta marbuta, and then there's a way to make it plural. Okay, so let's go ahead and go through the signs. So we have muslimun, so muslimuna. Try to be consistent. So this una is a sign of rafa. Una. Muslimuna. And I'm not going to... Muslimuna. Okay? Muslimina. Muslimina. And by the way, they got lazy again. Same sign for a jar. Muslimuna, muslimina, muslimina. Okay? Those are the signs. I'll just put it so everyone can. Muslimina. And then for females, plural, it's muslimatun. Okay? And for nasab, it's muslimatin. And again, same sign. Muslimatin, muslimatin. Okay? So this table is basically the same idea. It's found on page 52, right? 52? 51, yeah. So you have that to review. And so basically, like I said, if you see kitabain, if you see muslimina, you're saying, why is it muslimina, it's not muslimuna? Why do we see these changes in the Quran? Now you know why. So if you see muslimuna, most likely it's the subject of the sentence. If you see muslimina, it's either nasab or jar. And the reason why they could do this is because we know there's only two reasons why a word takes jar. If it doesn't have those two reasons, then it must be nasab. So it's either, if we could say, it's either, how do I? Ana ad'u Allah, I make dua to Allah, للمسلمين. اللهم اغفر لي المسلمين والمسلمات. So let me show you the dua, okay? Does everyone have this? Go ahead and take that down, inshallah. I'll show you the example of how or why you can identify, why you can have the double signs, why you can do that, why you can cheat, why the Arabs were able to cheat. They got lazy a little bit. Because they're like, man, jar is so simple, man, we'll figure it out. And so everyone else will figure it out too. So, I'll give you an example for that. Everyone has the top part at least? Mm-hmm. Okay. Allahumma اغفر لي والمسلمات. I want you guys to tell me how to do the grammatical state of Muslim. Allahumma means, oh Allah. Ighfir. Ighfir is a command, or it's called talab. When you're asking Allah, okay? It's from the verb ghafara. And we're going to learn these with sarf, inshallah. Ghafara. Ghafara. Okay? Which means to what? He forgave. He forgave. Okay, that's the root. So when you change it and you add ighfir, Allahumma ighfir. So when you pronounce it, you say Allahumma ighfir li al-muslimina wal-muslimat. And I didn't pronounce the ending for a reason, because I want you guys to tell me what I should do. Should it be un or in? Lil-muslimina wal-muslimat. What should be the ending?
والمسلمات.
Excellent, mashallah. Because of the alif. Okay? Allahumma ighfir lil muslimina wal muslimat. Does that make sense? Why?
Yeah, so this Muslimina wal Muslimati are together, it's not separate, because if there's the li, lil. So why we, okay, so why we, okay. Why not say lil Muslimina wal Muslimat?
Wal lil muslimat? Yeah. So why can't you say Allahumma ighfir lil muslimina wal lil
Muslimini?
muslimini?
Because there's a lam before that.
Because what is the jar? So if we have a lam, this lam is called what? It's called harf.
Harf.
Jar.
Harf jar, right?
So what does it do to the words that come after it?
State of jar, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
That my question is that the word after that harf jar is Muslimin.
yes.
Why not is Muslimini? Why is Muslimina? Why is Fatha on Noon?
So to answer that question, look at the chart. So what is the jar of sound masculine plural?
Okay. Ina.
Ina. There is no kasra. It's not kasra. The ending is ina, not ini. Okay? So remember that. That sound, ina. That's the most common question I ever get. Ini. Why is there no kasra at the end? Because kasra is only a sign of jar for singular words and broken plurals. The sign of sound masculine plurals is muslimina. Okay? So li al-muslimina wal muslimati. The question is, this muslimati could also be nasab, right? So we need to ask ourselves, what is its grammatical state? Nasab, right? Or jar. it's either of those two because just by looking at how it looks, it can be either of those two. And so it's simple. The first question you said is it jar? And there's only two reasons why a word can be jar. Either because it follows a harf jar, because that's the word, that's what a harf jar does. It turns the word after it into a state of jar. So li, fi, min, ala, all these things. Bi, bismi, Allahi. Bismi, Allahi. So that is the state of jar. So now we have to ask ourselves, what is it? What is it? Does it follow that rule, or is it a part of a possessive compound? Kitabullahi. And so the obvious answer is that it follows li, lam. So lillahi, lil muslimina, wal muslim. Actually, the proper way to write this, I apologize, is you connect it like this without a alif. That's horrible. Li. Go ahead.
So are you saying because it's a li, that's why it's one kasra at the end of Muslim?
No, the one kasra is because it is alif. There's an alif lam attached to it.
Oh.
Yeah, the definiteness.
Oh,
But I think we
okay.
need to review the definiteness in a minute, more thoroughly. Inshallah. So alif lam. Inshallah, remind me at the break, and I'll go over the other three characteristics.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
al-Muslimin.
So there's Allahumma ighfirli wa li walidayya
Don't go into that
wa
one.
lil mu'minin.
Don't go into that one. Walid Allahumma ighfir li, which is me. Wali walidayya. Walidayya is our parents, okay? But it's when you adding my parents, it changes it a little bit. So don't worry about that one. Walil muslimina wal muslimat wal mu'minina wal mu'minat, etc. Okay? So li, the reason why it is in this grammatical state is because li. Okay? There's a li there. Two. Allah have mercy, two. Allah forgive, two. Ghafara usually needs to have a li after it, okay? So ghafara li. There are some verbs that need a letter after it. Don't worry about that right now. Okay? So I'm going to give you a construct. Does everyone understand this? So the point is that the reason why you can have these three different duals, sound masculine plurals and sound feminine plurals, the reason why you can have the nasab and the jar look the same is because there are two simple rules for a jar. If you want to know the two simple rules for a jar, I'm going to give you guys a very easy example, inshallah. And this, if you remember this example, you remember all the two states, the two reasons for jar, okay? And it's something that you say all the time. Can anyone think about it? What is something that you say all the time that gives you an example of the two possible reasons why a word can be in the state of jar? I'll let you guys think about it during the break. Okay, let's take a break right now, inshallah, and I'll give you that example. A simple term that we say that has examples of the two possible reasons why a word takes the state of jar. We say it all the time. Does everyone have this down? Okay, I'm assuming we do.
Yeah.
Go ahead and take a break, inshallah.
This part is kind of